Now, the Civil Society Working Group on State Capture wants President Cyril Ramaphosa to ensure that recommendations of the Zondo Commission are implemented. Parts of the recommendations including transparency in the process of appointing a National Director of Public Prosecutions. Well, joining us now is Wayne Duvenage, CEO of Outa, to shed more light. Wayne, good to have you, and thank you very much for coming on. Well, the appointment needs to happen at least by the end of January 2026. Would you say the horse has already bolted?
Yeah, I mean, it should have happened some time ago, quite frankly. You'd want some handover period. So they really have left it very late. And I think to Lawson Naidu's point, the succession planning for interviews and finding a successor it needs to be reviewed. The succession really is poorly handled, quite frankly. And thus this letter by the Civil Society Working Group to the President to take up some of the recommendations that were put forward by Zondo, that we need to plan for this. We need to have greater transparency and more public engagement and involvement in the process.
I think the last report from the President in terms of the implementation of the Zondo Commission report, I think, was putting them at a very high score, or the other side of 60%, if I'm not mistaken, saying, well, we've implemented what the Zondo Commission has said. Do you think there was an oversight on this particular matter, or maybe the program just got too tight in Parliament in terms of amending the Act, and we have G20, and there's all sorts of things that are happening at this point?
Yeah, look, I mean, Zondo's recommendations were out a long time ago, and recently, under criticism from the public, yes, the presidency put out a statement that they had achieved 40% of those recommendations. Well, we don't buy that. No, were the minor ones. These are the important recommendations. The NPA has been embroiled in a lot of controversy over the years. It was stalled under Sean Abrams in the state capture years. And yes, Shamila Batoy has started to correct that. But I think, if the president isn't going to implement some meaningful changes in these types of appointments, and not only them, but as we say in the letter, the deputy directors of public prosecutions, then we have a serious problem. And we've seen some of those appointments have been found wanting, with Andrew Chaka now being recently removed. So there's a lot of work to do to get the leadership right, to install the credibility that we need at the NDDP.
What exactly needs to change in the Act that could allow for the degree of transparency that you're calling for? I mean, the president would say, well, I mean, it's still my prerogative to appoint. Hence, I've even opened up that space and given a panel, independent panel, to come and shortlist for me, and then I'll come in and then appoint and use that prerogative. Is that not transparent enough?
Well, it's a far cry from what happened in Zuma's days, and it wasn't bad in the past. So it's a lot better. But we believe that panel, that 6-person panel, should include people from civil society or civil society organizations in leadership positions. And again, we're looking for strength in leadership skills, not just in the skills of national prosecutions and the legal process, but what we need is skills in systems management, organizational change. This is an entity that needs to move with the times. It needs extremely strong leadership. So you can put somebody in who's got all the knowledge and understanding of the law and those processes and prosecutions. But if they're not going to lead an organization with the strength that is required, then we're going to perpetuate some of the problems. So firstly in that, I think we need to bring in more public involvement, civil society involvement, and greater transparency in the process, more time, and start looking at this not only at the national, but at the deputy national public prosecutors.
Are you less than satisfied with the credentials of those who have occupied that office, including the current outgoing NDPP?
Yeah, look, as I said, it's infiltrated. It's been infiltrated by, as Shamila Batoy said in the past, this organization has been infiltrated, and has and the criminal justice system. I mean, for the first time, we're seeing judges being arrested for bribes. We've seen the Andrew Chaka matter, and in the Eastern Cape how the public prosecutors are impacted. and influenced and bad decision making. So a lot has to change there. And as we said, by now this appointment should have been made. So there should be at least a 3-month handover period with the outgoing NDPP.
Your letter says you suspect there could be unwritten rules or unwritten requirements that are read into who qualifies to be in this position. What do you mean by that?
How does it? Well, I think the first question you've got to ask is, how does somebody like Menzies Simelane even make it to the top 6 out of the 32 applicants? Something is very flawed in that process. We know there was a lot of controversy with his appointment in the past, and his appointment was actually ruled unlawful, and a lot of question marks around that. So you wonder, how does that happen? So firstly, obviously, when they do get down to going through the selection process, there are rules and unwritten discussions that are pertaining to or speaking to specifics that they're looking for. Well, we need to see those. What are those? Because it's not just, what are the full credentials is what we're saying, and the requirements and the skills and the experience for these positions. We don't know that, and we want transparency on that.
Yeah. The question of vetting, I suppose, is a question that's also coming out with the Zondo Commission, the ad hoc committee processes that we are listening to the inquiry as to how people are vetted, how, for example, those who are head of departments in the minister's offices are vetted and so on and so forth. You are calling for a more independent process in terms of this vetting.
Yeah, far more independent. And in fact, this has come out in the whole anti-corruption strategy advisory documents that have been put forward to the president, which the current acting police minister has been part of. He chaired that panel. And we need the NDPP to be moved away from control under the presidency and under the Department of Justice. I think this is a department that we want to have its own independent budgets, allocated by Parliament, reporting into Parliament, a real independent Chapter 9 institution. And we need a similar type of independence when it comes to other appointments in positions of power in government, but certainly in this one.
Do we have a big pool, though, in your view, Wayne, of where we can pick from in terms of candidates? I mean, if you look at the judiciary and how they would do the appointments of judges, there is not really a big pool of judges in particular areas, maybe in the area of magistrates in a rural area somewhere, than there would be, I suppose, a pool of judges to pick from in a more urban area. Don't you think we'll be confronted with such a challenge when it comes to an NDPP, whether we've got a big pool of candidates to pick from?
Yeah, I think there is. The fact that there were only 32 applicants says that probably a lot of people that would be good for this role, if it had more independence, but just aren't applying because it's a poison chalice. It must be one of the most difficult positions to take up. So I do believe, but also we need to widen the scope of what we're looking for. As I said earlier on, some understanding and knowledge of the law and the prosecution process is one thing, but we need systems thinking, we need leadership, we need strong leadership to take action, to hold people account in the prosecuting environment, to make sure that we don't have some of the things that have happened and unfolded over time, like Andrew Trauco being in that position for as long as he was, and allowing people like Zizi Codwell off the hook and so forth. So I think there are enough people out there, but I think more would come forward willingly if the conditions of that employment, that position, were a little bit different to what they are now. It's highly politicized, and there's a lot of influence that you have to juggle and deal with, and that's a worry.
Appreciate your time, Wayne. Thank you very much for coming on. That's Wayne Duvenage, CEO of Outa there, on the call that civil society is making for more robust laws in the appointment of the NDPP.